Do not adjust your set. We control the volume. We control the vertical. We control the horizontal. You're about to enter the realm of Gold Coast After Dark. And I bet some of you, if you're old enough, thought I was about to say The Outer Limits, which is where that opening is stolen from. One of my favorite programs when I was a kid, way, way back. For those who don't know, it was science fiction. Spooky stuff for the time. Um, so that's that. Well, again, but welcome back to this edition of Gold Coast After Dark, the continuing reading of After Halloween, a sort of fairy tale from a grandson Jax in Texas. Um, Now, today is Wednesday, the 21st of July, 2021. Beautiful, warm, sunny day, makes two in a row. Perfect day for being at the beach. Of course, we're not at the beach. As you can see, I have two acoustical tiles on the wall behind me. There's another one directly ahead of me. Assorted guitar cases behind me, including my treasured Hofner bass, just like Paul McCartney's, except it's right-handed. So yeah, this is where we normally are. In other words, the reason, despite this beautiful weather, I mean, it's like the fifth warm and sunny day of the summer. The reason we're inside, not outside, is twofold. One, it is not 1966. This is not Dick Clark's Where the Action Is, with happening guys and gals listening to happening sounds from Paul Revere and the Raiders and Sonny and Cher and the Seeds and the Leaves and whoever else they might drag in off the maybe the New Colony Six. I don't know. But no, that's one reason. This isn't Southern California in 1966. The other reason is I had to start taking blood pressure medicine. Okay? Now, I used to take blood pressure medicine, and of course, it's one of those things people always say because everybody knows it's true. Once you start taking blood pressure medicine, you have to take it forever. Well, I'm here to tell you that's not the way it is. Why? Because I know, because I went years without blood pressure medicine. I lost my health insurance. So I just went without and I just adjusted the things I do. That's how it is. You make adjustments. That's how you get through life. So I made adjustments, but when I came here to Europe, and now here in the Netherlands, where they have socialized medicine, I became a legal resident. Still a U.S. citizen, but a legal resident, which entitled me to health care. So I went to my doc, found a doc, went to the doc, and he said, well, we need to do something about your blood pressure. So he gave me blood pressure medicine. All right, now, what happened is earlier this summer, on the 3 days that we actually had sunshine before, I think it was maybe at the beginning of June, maybe it was in May. I've been outside trimming and sort of an overgrown walkway, the weeds and stuff, and brambles from the blackberry bushes that are there, trying to clear a path for my neighbors, Mohammed and Marcel, who like to walk that way, and it's actually on our property line. So it's like, hey, I'm an accommodating kind of guy. So I was out trimming all this stuff around. So I did that. Took me all morning, and of course I was out there with my shirt off. Um, you know, so to work on, working to work on my tan. Plus, it was going to be sweaty and one thing or another. So, anyway, but I finished that and I came inside and I had a glass of nice cold iced water. And then I went outside and still with my shirt off. I stretched out on the bench of the picnic table with a book and read. And I did that um, for the rest of the afternoon into the early evening because here at 9:30 at night in the summertime, you can still sit outside and read a book without a problem. That's how light it is here. Okay, well, the next morning I woke up and I was itching all over my arms and on my chest. That afternoon, it looked like somebody had thrown acid on me. Turns out blood pressure medicine does not react well with direct sunlight. So I had to deal with that, and they gave me some cream and stuff to smear on it. And then what they said is uh, for the rest of my life, as I take blood pressure medicine, and regardless of the time of year, if I want to be outside, because it's a very temperate climate here. It's very much like Seattle. And much like Seattle, it does not rain every day. It doesn't rain every day in Seattle. It doesn't rain every day here. That's TV, folks. But they gave me, say, well, you got to put this on. It's like some sort of sunblock to protect myself. Ain't going to happen. I'll find a way. I don't care if I have to wear long sleeve shirts for the rest of my life. I like long sleeve shirts, so that's okay. But anyway, but that's why, but why tempt fate? That's why I'm in here instead of out there doing this. So that's okay. And whatever it takes, like I said, you've got to make adjustments. So here we are. And with the next installment of After Halloween for my grandson Jax, who lives in Fort Worth. And as you may recall, the other day we had talked a bit more with the twinkly-eyed saxophonist at the end of the section, which was called 9 Days Later. We had gone our separate ways. All right. And then, sorry, that was Music on the Wind. The last section, which was 9 Days Later, we had still been talked with, with the twinkly-eyed saxophonist. I was up on Boogie's Hill, and he was down at the edge of the forest calling up to me. I invited him to come up to the hill, to the summit where I was, and or that I would come down to see him. Either way, I'm an accommodating guy, as has been noted. He said no, that wasn't necessary, and he didn't really have time. He just wanted to say goodbye, and uh, he made me promise to that I would practice my flute. Well, of course, and that hey, I could if I came back and saw him in the spring, because I remember he doesn't play. He plays to seasons, so he plays to spring, summer, and fall. He doesn't play to the winter. But if I came back in spring, we would have 3 seasons to talk about anything we wanted to talk about. And I promised that I just might bring back some licorice. What kind of licorice? Black licorice, the only kind of licorice to eat. Forget everything else. I don't care what you like. Black licorice is the only licorice. Forget that other stuff. That's the way it is. All right, so now here we are. Mr. Three of Spades tells us we are at a section called Winter and a Day. And that's where we pick up. In the Bill verse, spring begins on March 1st, which was 111 days away. Plenty of time to perfect my embouchure, and I was sure become competent enough to get on the flute to get some kind of message across to the smaller variety of birds. Let them know I'm friendly, if nothing else. Embouchure, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, it's French. I have trouble with the language. I admit it. They're hereditary enemies of my people. That's the way it is. But it has to do with you're playing a reed instrument or a flute or something. Anything you have to blow in has to do with your lips. It's a technical thing. Um, I would like to think that they, the birds, knew already that I was friendly, as in recent months we'd placed a number of bird feeders, and birds snacked things both in front of the house and in the back garden, which we kept topped off with assorted seeds and nuts. There were also 4 feeder jars attached to the fences, 2 in front, 2 in back, for the crows and the jackdaws and the magpies, whose beaks were a little too large to access the contents of the other feeders. As a result of this largesse, our house had become quite a popular bistro among the avian community. As November ran into December, we had more and more crows dropping in and for longer periods of time. The starlings, collared doves, chaffinches, tits, robins, pigeons, woodpeckers, sparrows, blackbirds, parakeets, thrushes, bluethroats, and wagtails continued to show up in their usual numbers, but more and more crows had been stopping by. I had to look those names up. I'd never seen these kind of birds before, but I looked them up and I found out research is a good thing to do. Perched on the edge of the shed's roof, standing on top of the fence, milling around on the ground between the fence and the picnic table, they never bothered the smaller birds. Now, sitting at the end of the couch next to the radiator in the picture window, from time to time I'd look up from my laptop or whatever book I happened to be reading, do a little crow watching. I remembered reading crows were considered very intelligent and very social creatures. Unlike some of the smaller birds, I never saw any aggressive behavior among the crows. Often a flight of crows could be seen wheeling about in a loose formation overhead. I guess it was tough to get a table at our place. Now, crows don't sing. They may caw or make clicking sounds, or even croak, but they don't sing. There's another sound they make when there's large numbers of them standing about. It's sort of a murmur. I know this from documentaries and movies with Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds being the gold standard for that, more so than personal experience. I'd never had much opportunity to observe them back in the States, and here they took flight at the sound of the back door being opened. Uh, the ones overhead, of course, didn't seem to be bothered by what was going on 50 feet below them. I don't see me ever playing to crows, not only because they're rather skittish, but because, as noted above, they don't sing. It would be a rather one-sided conversation, I think. So anything I did on the flute probably wouldn't sound like much more to them than more misguided human noise. But a saxophone, a much more expressive instrument, can be high and squealy one moment, low and guttural the next. Still, it didn't seem right. But if trombones can be associated with elephants and flutes with the smaller birds, what instrument connects with crows? Cello, perhaps? And I think that may be more of a raven bird. The clarinet, another very expressive instrument. Maybe that would do, but that's kind of comical. I don't see crows as being comical. Now, before you laugh at this seeming digression of mine, you should know that my friend Stanley Booth, noted author and gentleman of the South, once had a bullfrog living in his swimming pool whose nocturnal blats and honks sounded so much like the lower register of a tenor saxophone he had dubbed him Coltrane. Now, I dutifully practiced my flute every day, never failed to do my breathing exercises and warm up fingering and blowing, always looking for those pure notes. And I do that before I devoted any time to actually trying to play anything. Usually short passages, occasional sustained note or two, things I considered suitable for birds and trees, or just meditation, which is why I got the flute in the first place. Just wanted to do it for myself and to calm me down or and to play in calm moments. There were several I committed to memory and played faithfully, note for note, while others were improvised pieces purely for the sake of playing. Improvised at my level of playing means, oh, that was an interesting note. How did I wonder how I did that? That's kind of how that was. Now, I didn't devote much time to thinking about the twinkly-eyed saxophonist. I didn't know his name, didn't know where he came from, or where he'd gone, and didn't really care to know. Now, those things didn't seem important, so why bother to even speculate? Personally, though it goes against contemporary custom, I don't tell anyone anything about myself. I don't think they really need to know. Now, if he felt I needed to know such things, I expect he would have told me. December passed with one day much like the day that preceded it. Colder temperatures, but despite being dangerously close to the North Sea and at a higher latitude than Calumet City in my beloved Gold Coast neighborhood, you rarely see snow on the rooftops here in Vlardigan. The year before, there'd been a slight dusting around 9 o'clock one morning, but it had melted away by the time I'd finished my lunch at 1 o'clock that same afternoon. Rain, yes. High winds, yes. Cold, yes. But snow rarely happens here. Which is why to see snow on the ground come Christmas morning came as such a surprise, but not as much of a surprise as what arrived with the snow. Now, I have always been an early riser. Am now, was then, all the way back to when I was a kid. I used to get up, watch the farm report on WGN TV in Chicago. Once the farm report went off, I watched 5 minutes of, or 5 or 10 minutes of Mahalia Jackson singing spirituals. And from then on to Ray Rayner and Friends and cartoons. That's early rising, folks. So once I'm downstairs, the first thing I do, put on some water for a cup of tea. While that's going on, I set up the coffee maker so it'll be ready whenever the rest of the household deigns to roll out of their beds, because again, I am an accommodating sort of guy. Third thing I do is open the living room curtains to let in the new day. That morning, when I opened the curtains, the sudden motion caused the 20 or so crows, who had been bunched together on the ground between the picnic table and the fence, to take flight. The thin layer of snow that covered the backyard was certainly a pleasant surprise, a reminder of Christmases past. But the real surprise was in what the crows had left behind: a long, shiny black tail feather, and Merry Christmas spelled out in twigs on the snow. Standing at the back door, I did a quick survey of the back garden. It's not that big, really. There were no shoe or boot prints in the snow, not from the back door or the gate or along the fence line. The twigs were on top of the snow, as was the feather. The only marks of any kind were the footprints left behind by the crows. As previously stated, crows are considered highly intelligent as birds go, but this strained credulity. By this time, my tea was ready, so putting on my sweater, my tennis shoes, and holding my favorite mug in both hands to take advantage of its warmth, I stood outside looking at the message. Now, I'd been to a lot of places and I've seen a lot of things, but I've never seen anything like that. So I squatted down for a closer look, also to pick up the feather, which I stuck over my right ear with the quill between my hair and my glasses. Even upon closer inspection, there were no traces of any living creature that didn't have crow feet, and the twigs were definitely on top of the snow. Now, I wondered what to do about this message. Now, even if I took photos with my cell phone's camera, I didn't expect anyone to believe I had nothing to do with its creation. In the end, I decided to leave it alone. If anyone noticed it, I would tell the truth, and once they stopped laughing, I would take credit for it. No need to disrupt the Christmas spirit by taking a stand on the intelligence of crows. As it turned out, I didn't have to say anything or do anything, because an hour later the temperature had risen enough that a light rain began to fall. By the time the rest of the household was ambulatory, snow had disappeared, the message reduced to a collection of scattered twigs, just twigs on the ground. The rest of the holiday season passed without further incident, as did January and the first 27 days of February. On February 28th, I opened the living room curtains, startled about 20 crows, found myself looking at another message laid out in twigs. tomorrow. With only 28 days in February that year, the next day would be March 1st, the first day of spring by the Bilverse calendar, as we know. And though I don't know how he did it, I now knew who was behind the Christmas Day message. So that evening, I loaded up my backpack, leaving my flute out so I could practice in the morning. The tail feather would make the trip in the flute case. Now, I didn't want to show up after a long winter and not be ready to go. The next morning, I put the kettle on for the day's first cuppa, set up the coffee maker, drew back the curtains, and once more startled 20 or so crows into the sky. It's amazing how they do that. There was another message. Don't wait for me. For spelled out, written out numerically. Sorry. Don't wait for me. Huh, okay. In the Bill verse, that would mean go ahead and start without me. And it would seem a safe bet that's what it meant in his verse. So I took it to mean he would be running late, would be there as soon as he could manage it. Remembering he wouldn't cross beyond the edge of the forest back in November, I intended to head to the oak tree where we first met, since no other location had been mentioned, and it was only there I knew there wasn't. I mean, it was it. Um, on the way out, I stopped at Boogie's Hill, of course, as was my custom. Gave thanks to the universe for, among other things, another day and another chance to get it right. Our puffy cumulus clouds, if I recalled my junior high science lessons correctly, hung in the sky with patches of bright sunshine streaming through the gaps. 20 minutes later, I was back on the path on my way to the second gate in Cattle Guard after you turned out of the avenue of trees. Hadn't heard a saxophone. Now, I knew there hadn't been any changes to the main path since November, but of these paths in the forest itself, I couldn't say. I had taken the A20 overpass to this side of the highway plenty of times over the past 4 months, but had not ventured into the forest itself. I wasn't sure I belonged in there on my own. I can't explain why. So I'd stuck to the main paths until that one day. As on my first visit, I dismounted on the main path. Then, once through the gate and across the cattle guard, I pushed my bike all the way down to the second path and then to the oak tree. There hadn't been any fallen branches or new bumps or dips, just a lot of leaves. The twinkly-eyed saxophonist wasn't at the oak tree, and there was no sign he'd been there since November. Leaving my bike on the path, I shrugged off my backpack, took out my flute case, set the pack against the tree. I waited a few minutes, occasionally scanning the surrounding area, but I didn't see anyone. I had the feeling not many nature buffs ventured into this part of the forest. Eventually, I started playing, though not with a great deal of confidence. After 45 minutes or so, just about high noon, I took a break, sitting against the tree for some tea and a pair of tuna salad sandwiches I'd packed along. After half an hour, still sitting against the oak, I started playing again. An hour went by. I took a break. There was still no sign of my friend. I resolved to play until 3 o'clock, which was now a little more than an hour away. At that point, I'd wipe down my flute, pack up, and head for home. When 3 o'clock rolled around, I was still playing all by my lonesome. I packed up, and remembering my friend's actions from our first meeting, I gave a slight bow to the tree, thanked it for its patience in putting up with my inadequate playing. At my bike, I turned back to the oak and said, I'll do better tomorrow. That's a promise. And as I was turning away, my eye caught a bit of motion. I looked back just in time to see a large, dark green leaf spin lazily down and land right where I'd been sitting throughout the afternoon. Laughing, I walked over, picked it up, bowed again, said thank you kindly, and slipped it into my jacket pocket. One large oak leaf for a 4-hour day. Wasn't much, but it was better than nothing, and I'd heard those leaves add up. And look who's here, Mr. Jack of Hearts, and he is still dancing away as ever. How he does it defies explanation. So that's it. So now I've fulfilled my part. Twinkly-eyed saxophonist has not shown up. Well, we will be back. The next section will be called A Changing of the Guard. We are entering into the home stretch of this story. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being part of this exercise for Jax. Thank you for being part of Gold Coast After Dark, because we're all in this together. And final word, this is Wednesday, so 2 more days. Jimmy Page Turner will be back once again to do It's the Mail, to read us your emails and answer them in his inimitable fashion. And until then, keep them flying. This is your old pal BP saying, see ya.